Yo, how's it going, you guys? It's Marcus Scraper. So we're going to talk a little bit about Metromile stock or Mile stock. And this is a position that I've been trading for quite some time. And we'll talk a little bit about where I've been buying, where I've been selling. And also here we can see that I was talking about this. This was post on 520 that I thought $8 could be an interesting point basically, and we can see that this is the chart right over here. We were over here. The next day, basically, we end up closing right on $8. So that was interesting. And so we're going to get into this now. But before we get into this video, if you get any value from this content, don't forget to smash down on the like button. It really helps this content, helps other people see this video. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel. I'd really appreciate it. And also, if you're into cryptocurrency, you can get up to $250 in a Bitcoin bonus with BlockFi. And also, I definitely like to take advantage of their 8.6% APY on stablecoin. So if you don't even like cryptocurrencies, you can be interested potentially in a stable coin and get that 8.6% yield, which is pretty amazing. And these are the payout structure down below here. And without further ado, let's take a look at some of the risks and also some of the rewards that we have in terms of the profile of what we are looking at. So in the broader market, we're looking at the S&P 500 right over here. We can see that we are at this interesting juncture. I talked about in my last update, if you follow my videos, that this is some overhead resistance that we were seeing here, and we expected basically to fill the gap, which we exactly did on Friday. So we got that gap filled. But B, I thought we would get rejected and probably go below. Both of these things happened. Now we can look into the details now of understanding more of the risk and reward things that are going on here. It would have been bullish if we closed above the 20-day moving average. We did not close above the 20-day moving average. We have to understand that we are also still in this sideways choppy movement going on at the moment here, but at the same time we are closing above some of these price actions that we had down below here. This is basically very indecisive at the moment. We don't know if we're going to go to the upside, to the downside, and we have the momentum of continuing to potentially go to the upside, especially we see the relief and growth in speculative plays. But at the same time, we also have to be aware that, well, we closed below the 20-day moving average, and that was pretty bearish. So we'll see what happens. This is not necessarily a positive for Metromile, and we would want to see strength in the overall market to improve our odds of what's going to happen with Metromile. Another thing with Metromile that you have to consider at least is that I think to a certain extent, Bitcoin impacts the price maybe. I think that in general, investors know that Metromile either bought Bitcoin or plan to purchase Bitcoin. We don't know if they purchased already or not. Hopefully they purchased and bought the dip. But here's the thing. Bitcoin could also impact Metromile stock potentially. And this could potentially be a negative thing. It would not necessarily be such a positive thing. If Bitcoin increases a lot, it's not necessarily going to bring Metromile up. It's more like a tax. If Bitcoin sells off a lot, that could impact Metromile side. That's just some food for thought right there. Now, if we look at this chart right here that we're looking at, basically we see that we hit this line here a couple times before, and also right over here too. We had a false breakout up here and then gap down below. So what have I been doing with Metromile? Well, first of all, I've been buying Metromile back over here when it was in the $12 range. And then I sold Metromile. Actually, so I kept my position for the most part and lived through this crash. And I sold up here. I sold it over $13. I didn't sell at the top here, so $13.50, I think it was. So we're talking about something around here. This is when I sold. The reason why I sold is because I saw this amazing strength in Metromile. However, the overall growth and all the other stocks and all the other SPACs did not bounce this high. It did not make sense why everything else was having a tough time and not seeing too much strength, and Metromile was blowing it out of the water. That did not make too much sense for me. So because of these reasons, I decided to sell here and continue my trade, because this was a trade of mine. And we can see that the next time I picked up shares actually was when we had this dip here. I picked up shares in the $8 range, and then I sold shares in the $10 range. So not at the top here, but in the $10 range over here. So that's what I did there. And then next, this is the third part of my swing trade here. I've been buying this dip ever since here, all the way down here, and I doubled up here and I tripled up here. So my cost basis right now is $7, I think 42 or 43 cents. So we are at $8 at the moment. And because of the fact that I doubled up and tripled up on this swing trade, because I saw this opportunity, especially with earnings, listening to earnings, seeing what was playing out, I was thinking that we could see a drop to like $6.40. And I think that we dropped actually pretty close to that, actually. I think a little further potentially. This was after hours. And then we bounced up the next day. And so that's kind of what I was thinking. And the reason why I was thinking about that, I was thinking that this could be a similar thing to Palantir in a way of what happened to their earnings. But the other thing is that it's just we were at such a low point that it just seemed like the likelihood of going higher was more likely. And then also the likelihood of just a one last effort to flush people out of their positions was also very likely too. So, since I accumulated so many shares, actually, I've been selling, especially on Friday. I reduced my position basically just to cut it down to a normal position, a normal risk to reward position, because I had, again, doubled and tripled up on my position. So, it was overexposed to Metromile stock. And just to reduce my risk, and because $8 is an area that I would consider that probably be resistance. Now, having said all that, what do I think is going to happen actually? Because I have a very sizable amount still in this position. This is my largest swing trade at the moment here, this position. And I have a couple swing trades going on here. This is the largest position still, despite the fact that I've been selling off as much as half of my position actually. But this is a large position, it's a 5-figure position. And if you look at over here, actually the resistance lines, the next targets that I see are very straightforward. It's $9 and then $10. This is very straightforward. And this is not just being too, I'm not trying to make it so routed. Basically, we can see these areas over here. Basically, we see an area of initial resistance right around here. This breakdown candle, this is low is actually exactly $9. So that's why $9 is the first area of resistance if we break to the upside. And the second area is $10. The low here is $10.04. I think that this area of $10 is pretty significant and also has some significance because this is a SPAC, and so this started at $10 too. So we can understand that this is a SPAC, started at $10. We have some hits at around $10. $10 will be my next area of resistance. So I personally will be looking for $9 and $10 and see how price interacts with these levels. And this is kind of how I'm playing this. And this is a swing trade, and I will hold on some shares as we potentially break these levels to the upside. And I will hold on to shares, and eventually I will be holding on to some free shares for this stock because I do want to hold on to some of these shares because I am interested in the future for selling covered calls against Metromile. So I want to hold a good chunk and a good batch of Metromile shares so I can just be selling a few covered calls, especially with such a potentially low cost basis. Because in the future, this is going to be something that potentially can go a lot higher. And this is just a potentially juicy opportunity for myself to potentially sell some nice covered calls. Because long term, I'm expecting, I wouldn't be surprised to see $14, $15, and by long term I mean like maybe in a year from now price target. So that's not so far away, and we're talking about, if we're saying $14, $15, this is almost a 2x opportunity in that short period of time. And I think that's actually likely as long as the company continues to perform and continues to acquire customer growth. So I think this is pretty interesting. I think that it has a likelihood of being a $14 to $15 stock in a year from now. But again, there is a lot of risks, and I do hold a lot of speculative growth companies, so I'm not necessarily interested in just holding my entire position for the long term, just because of the, again, we're talking about risk management and just taking some profits here and there. This is, again, currently a swing trade. I will definitely be selling some, and I'll be holding some shares as well. Okay, now let's look at what's going on here exactly. If we think that this is going to be a breakout here. So if we zoom in a little bit here, we can see that we closed basically right on the mark here. We closed right on this line here. And if we had to be picking sides of whether we think we're going to break to the upside or break to the downside, all we have to do is close flat the next day. And we can technically break out of this line, right? So we can close flat the next day and potentially just have a gradual run to the upside eventually, right? We don't have to be doing something too crazy. Now, the key thing, in my opinion, is where we open. If we open below this trend or open above this trend line, this is what I'm going to be watching here. So what does that exactly mean exactly? Let's take a look at what that price level is. So we're talking about a price of around $7.82 ish. Let's just say it's $7.85. So it is very likely that we break above this trend. It's very likely. So as long as we don't open below this trend line here or just completely fall, because the other scenario is it is possible, it's not as likely, but we could see a move to the downside. We could before finally breaking out again to the upside. That's possible. I just don't think that's so likely, especially with this what happened here with earnings and the crazy downward pressure and downward shakeout that we had, and now people that are in the stock wishing they didn't sell potentially. So because of these things, I think that my bias is that we are going to go to the upside. Now we just have to watch our levels of where we might get rejected and how far growth can go before being rejected to the downside and how long this rally will actually last for. Well, I hope you guys got some value from this content. If you haven't already, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And keep in mind that none of this is financial advice. This is just some random guy on YouTube drawing some stick figure lines on a chart talking to you guys.